Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to feature the latest Nighthawk design and build. So for those of you that don't know, my name is Troy Joseph Crowe of Crowe Custom Audio Products. This is our flagship speaker system meant for home hi-fi listening. And so this is a design that I had come up with about 5 years ago and kind of a version of this. And so we're now on version 3. And so in this video, I'm going to talk about the design goals, some of the physical features, acoustical features of the design, what the specifications are, and then later in the video, I'm going to do a little bit more of a technical deep dive on, the design rationale for why this exists. So the first design, you can see it kind of had the hourglass shape, kind of a basic up and down design, and we designed and built that, did testing. I even featured a video on some of the detailed measurements, and so we took those measurements and we refined it even further, and so you have what you see here today. So this is intended as the ultimate as far as coherency, output SPL. When I say output SPL, I mean the mantra or the slogan of the business is bring your music to life. And so this is trying to achieve that. It's interesting because you kind of have to wear two hats. Part of me is the passionate music lover that is just trying to create an experience that's, something that's imprinted on your mind. You have late night listening sessions where you want to enjoy your music, and for a lot of my customers it's a therapy that they rely on, and so that's the way it is for me. It's the music, it's trying to create that experience, and the dispassionate scientist side is a necessity where you methodically go through and objectively look at every single design detail to achieve the passion side. And I enjoy watching Terrell's Classic Workshop on YouTube, and he's basically a automotive historian on the classic Italian supercars, and he talks about the various designers throughout history that have designed the Ferrari Flat 12, for example, and it's kind of similar with this, where you're after a particular experience, whether it be the roar of a V or a Flat 12 Ferrari, behind you, and in a Testarossa. And at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is the nitty gritty technical details of like the engine design and how to achieve that kind of the bleeding edge of performance and making it reliable and achieving that sound, right, and that performance. And so that's what this is. It's using every ounce of mechanical engineering background that I have in designing it in SolidWorks and trying to come up with something that achieves a goal. And so I'll kind of be wearing two hats in this video. One is the passionate music lover that's looking for a particular experience, and then looking at just the nuts and bolts of it to achieve that goal. So, the hourglass shape, I had a comment, and I don't lean too much on comments on social media, but somebody had commented that it's all about the sound and that I've just created an art piece, but I haven't focused on the sound, and that's quite a ludicrous statement. This is as much form follows function as any of the designs that I've introduced so far, and that the hourglass shape is completely functional. So you have the high frequency horn, and it's narrowed down into a smaller horn, which offers wider coverage. And that's going to give you that soundstage, all-enveloping spaciousness that you're looking for in your listening room. The challenge with horn speakers is how to integrate the mid-range large format horn with the smaller high frequency, and bringing those drivers close enough together that it provides a coherent sound, especially when you're talking about a 2 meter or a 2.5 meter listening distance. And so that is what this design achieves, in that you have 4 mid-range drivers flanking top and bottom, very close proximity to the high frequency driver. And so this is the only design that achieves that outside of co-entrant design, where you have the mid-range and treble combined into a single horn aperture. The limitations to that is that you can't achieve wide off-axis coverage in a large format horn. It's just not physically possible unless you go to what's called a constant directivity design, where it's basically a conical flare that stretches the high frequencies out. Now, what I've found is that a constant directivity horn introduces horn coloration. So right there, it's a non-starter. This uses the ES horn flare curvature, which has the complete wraparound smooth horn flare edges at the horn mouth. And so what that's going to do is it's going to reduce diffraction, or basically, and you can see from my measurements, is that it completely eliminates any of the horn coloration that's associated with, you know, the genre of horn speakers. And so by smoothing over the edges, you provide what I would refer to as a hi-fi sound character that's completely devoid of that horn coloration that so many find objective or offensive, and what's the word? They object to that, you know, even if it's just a little bit of horn coloration, they're like, nope, not for me. This does not offer or provide, this does not have any horn coloration. It's completely like what you would expect from a really good stand mount speaker. So moving on from that, the 4 mid-range drivers are 3-inch ScanSpeak, very high-end drivers that cover from 150 hertz up to the crossover point, which is 2 kilohertz. And so this kind of came by serendipity at, you know, when I was developing different horn designs. When I started my business, I had put, just for fun, 4 of these in the E250 front horn just to see what would happen. And instantly I was impressed by the vocal clarity when you put these small mid-range drivers into a 250 hertz front horn. I was actually quite excited at the time about the results, and I had invited friends over to hear just a single horn playing, I think it was Leonard Cohen, and he has a deep, you know, dynamic voice. And so well recorded, especially on vinyl, when you hear Leonard's voice on a really good large format front horn, it's just like jaw-dropping, you know, the presence and the scale that's offered. And I think unless you heard it, you don't know what you're missing. You know, a large stand, even a floor standing non-horn speaker would struggle to reproduce the dynamics that's actually available in the recording when it comes to, you know, artists like Leonard Cohen or even Ray LaMontagne. A good song is Gossip in the Grain. You know, they've pretty much maxed out the dynamic range on the recording, and it really is like a good litmus test for whether your speakers can reproduce the scale and dynamics that recording has. But anyways, so that's the idea here. Is the E250 front horn was just a regular exponential front horn. It's since then progressed into the ES curvature, which from dozens and dozens of tests that I've done reveals that the ES curvature just offers a level of clarity that's not available anywhere else that I'm aware of. So, so that's the mid-range. We covered the treble. Now, the treble, the version 1 Nighthawk started out with a 1-inch compression driver. The second version, we used the ViaWave ribbon tweeter, which is still an excellent tweeter and is now actually available again just recently. However, for this build, I decided on I originally was going to go with a 1-inch compression driver again. And then Mark from SB Audience, he's the marketing and engineering manager there, he gave me some pre-production samples of their latest compression driver, which is a 3-inch voice coil, 1.4-inch throat compression driver that has all the kind of the latest, you know, motor technology, which is copper shorting rings and that. And so he dropped off the samples, and then I was excited to get them. And so I directly compared them against the 65 CDNT, which is the 2.5-inch diameter voice coil that we use in, I think, 5 different designs. It's such an excellent compression driver. And so directly comparing the CDN or the 65 CDNT against the 75 CDNT, which is what this uses, I noticed a slight increase in overall clarity and a slight increase in overall dynamics, especially at the higher SPL. And so I made the decision kind of mid-project to integrate this compression driver into this design. So the throat actually had to increase from 1 inch to 1.4 inch. And also we developed a rear, I say we, it's just me. When I say we, I'm referring to Daniel and Emerson that helps in the shop. Actually, before I forget, I want to thank Daniel and Emerson for their hard work these past few weeks getting these speakers together. It's been definitely a team effort there. So I'll put a picture of us kind of high-fiving at the end of the day. That was yesterday, getting this all together. So it's quite rewarding, I think. Anyways, going on a complete tangent. the ADHD in me is just all over the map. I'll bring it back. Okay. I designed a rear cover for the 75 CDNT and then did a direct comparison there. And I'll put a link in the description to the test data, kind of directly comparing the stock compression driver with the rear cover. And the rear cover helps smooth out the frequency response, and it helped, especially in the upper treble. The rear cover really helped take it up another notch on sound quality on a compression driver that already had excellent sound quality, and it is kind of the pick of the litter amongst dozens of compression drivers. I should say as well that, you know, most compression drivers are not suitable for home hi-fi listening, but we've been able to pick out kind of the best and use those in our finished turnkey builds as well as our DIY plan sets. So it's using the latest, you know, and this is actually using pre-production sample from SB Audience, and we've ordered a few pair for some customers that still haven't come in yet. But so the latest design still uses kind of very similar front horn design that we've used in the version 2 design. The mid-range drivers actually are not closed back sealed, they're rear radiating as well. And so that helps provide some rear radiation for a more spacious mid-range sound. Now, the central tunnel here is required a lot of design effort, a lot of effort to build. It's also a solid hardwood central tunnel, and it houses the passive crossover. So special note on the passive crossover. So at this level, I feel like the final 5% of adjustment is really, it needs to be done in the home. And so this particular order, I'm actually going to be flying to the US and sitting down and doing the final tweaking. And I've incorporated some adjustment points in the passive crossover just to allow for some final tweaking of the high frequency and the mid-range, and then also the high frequency slope, because I find that some of my listeners, they do like a little bit of an accentuated treble, whether that's related to age-related hearing loss that needs to be accounted for, or maybe the room, the acoustics are having an effect there. So I guess it's just kind of maybe common knowledge in the audiophile world that you know, toe in, listening distance, the room, there's so many variables, upstream equipment, for example, if you're using you know, tube gear, sometimes tube gear can have maybe like a 1 dB roll off, and then combined with the amp and the preamp, it can end up, you know, having a little bit of a roll off in the upper treble. And so having some adjustment points there for on-site setup, I think with this level is pretty critical. And so I've designed the crossover so that I can strategically swap out some resistors and some capacitors to, you know, do the final tweaking on the sound. I haven't even covered the bass section, which is new, completely new for this version 3. And so it's using a bass reflex, 2 bass cabinets, an upper and a lower, which are identical. So this is a hybrid of active and passive. And so the bass is active using 500 watt plate amps that also incorporate DSP and active filtering. And so it's using a 200 hertz LR6 low pass filter, which actually ends up being more of like a second order crossover when it all is said and done with the acoustical measurements. So perfect slope, symmetry, between the bass and the mid-range, and I can put a picture there showing that. And so it really integrates perfectly. The aluminum subwoofers have a tuning frequency of 23 hertz. So dual passive radiators flanked left and right, and they are dual opposing, and so they move a tremendous amount. The X-Max one way on these, I believe, is around 12 or 15. I'd have to look it up. But 500 watts per, and so you're getting 1,000 watts per channel on the bass per side. And so the nice thing about this is it will work in a large listening room, and it's able to provide concert level bass even in a large listening room. And so combined with the compression driver and then the 4 mid-range drivers, and then with these bass modules, the overall experience, even in a large listening room, it's able to really have extremely low distortion, very, very high output SPL. And so the nice thing, again, checking off all the boxes here. So I'd say 90% of my customers are using tube amplification, and in the range of maybe a few watts up to maybe 20 watts. And so that becomes a really important factor when designing a speaker, that it needs to be very high sensitivity. And so what I've done with the active and hybrid is that the subs are receiving a speaker level signal from the speaker level input. Okay, so it's basically a set and forget. You connect your amplifier using the speaker wire, and so there's an auto on and auto off feature. So the plate amps are kind of concealed inside, and then you don't really have to worry about them at all, other than providing the AC mains power there to power up the amps. So it just is a great solution, and avoiding having to have signal cables going to the speakers as well. So sensitivity on the mid-range and treble is 100 dB using 16 ohm load. That's from about 200 hertz and up. Okay, so you're getting your tube amp is having to carry that 200 hertz and up. Along the lines of trying to integrate and establish a sound that's for the customer, the DSP allows me to notch out, the bass modes. So typically 45 hertz is a region where most rooms have a treble spot where there's going to be a peak in the bass response. And so just going in with a measurement mic on site and notching out that treble frequency, typically just a very narrow notch at around -3 dB, does wonders. Not too extreme, and we're only doing cuts to the frequency response in the bass to account for room boundary modes and the acoustics in your room. So the rear of the panel, we went to pretty great extent there to try to create a beautiful appearance front and back, and creating a clean, no wire mesh design. And so the little covers are removable. That gives access to the plate amps to allow for, reprogramming, or they're also program presets. There's 3 presets that you can toggle through, and that's another option there to just adjust the presets for your listening preference, whether you're listening to different genres of music and you want to go bass heavy, listening to pop music, for example, then you could put that on preset too. So some of the physical features on this build, the legs are cast aluminum from a foundry in the US, from a company called OK Foundry. And so they were able to sand cast the legs, and the actual mold for the legs was done with 3D printing. And so they have a technology where they can 3D print the sand cast mold. So they actually print the sand as like a mud slurry, which solidifies similar to traditional 3D printing. The legs are just extremely rigid and strong. And then the steel structure is 4.5 millimeter thick steel, also with the outward support. So just trying to create incredible mechanical rigidity. As these woofers start to reach their X-Max, you can put your hand on the cabinet and it's just completely stable, even when the woofers are moving what appear to be like 1.5 inches. So excellent stability structurally there. Not shown is the base plinth, which gets put on later today. We're actually packing these today, and they're going out in a few days, crated up, taken to the airport, and then it's FedEx Air Economy to the customer, which is actually next day, which is incredible. So that's it for this video. Nighthawk 1636. Take care and have a great day.